But let's talk about the Americas pivot, because a big part of League of Legends now is that Riot has said basically domestic leagues are not working. So this entire global franchise model that we did in all of our minor regions where, hey, back in the day, we set up leagues in Turkey and Oceania. By the way, hilariously, OPL, which is the Australian New Zealand Oceanic League, just announced, hey, things are changing and this doesn't exist anymore, but also we're not ready to tell you about the plans for what will exist, which is obviously
that's a classic Riot
insanely
move.
ominous.
Yeah.
You know,
you could say they have the concepts of a plan.
Yeah, but it's so that just got announced, right? They're obviously they're rolling that into the Pacific region, but essentially what Riot has been doing over a number of years now, without actually admitting it, is their plan of having all of these minor regions and major regions has failed. The game is not big enough to support all of these teams. They have outright said we need to reduce the number of teams so that our global revenue pool can pay out more to each team, which is exactly what they're doing in terms of reducing these LCS teams paying out. That's what they're saying. That's what John Needham said. And so now what we have are, the Turkish league was rolled into the European Tier 2 system. OPL, does it exist? Who can say? Not Riot, apparently. We know the old thing doesn't exist. Will a new thing exist? God only knows.
My favorite part about that is I know that in other esports, Australian CS is, and other game, Valorant is so small, you can roll it into a bigger region. I just love that one because I just love the insanity of like real world terms related to esports. So China is a region, not a country. But then Australia, that enormous fucking country at the bottom, that's literally, even like major cities in Australia are so far apart, the internet isn't like good enough to go between them and have recent ping. We can just say, that's basically like fucking Singapore and Taiwan, isn't it? Just join up there. Like, what? Like,
I mean, there are only like 20 million
people. It's so
insane,
I know. I love it. It's still mental, though. It's still mental, mate.
Large landmass, 0 people inside of it. So basically, like we're looking at a situation where Riot has been really drawing back on the number of leagues and everything right now. I mean, to our Counter-Strike friends here, Thorin and Richard, I'm sure this will amaze you. They have decided that perhaps more international events and higher peak viewership are better. Shocking.
Oh, they've decided they're going to do esports. Oh, my bad. Cool, right? So they're not just doing the shit version of the NFL anymore. We're doing esports. Tell you what, if they're doing esports in 2024, I'm in, right? Scout me in.
So what they've done is they've added another international event, obviously, moving to a global 3-split system. They're trying to have more international competition, which I agree with, by the way. I have always agreed with the plan.
So as well, Monty is inventing Twitch subs in 2024. They've now realized it's more hype when players from countries that are the best meet each other and sort of clash, determine who frequently. I know. Tell you what, these Riot guys, Monty, as long as they're allowed
something, they're cooking.
As long as they're allowed to predict once the results are in, they're fucking good. I'll tell you that, man. They've got a banger eye. I know.
So, I mean, I agreed with the merger of the Americas regions because I do think that despite all the Brazilian complaining, which mercifully we haven't seen on Twitter in a while, thank you very much.
Richard, I actually have to ask you.
For no reason at all.
Right, when you woke up and saw that, you must have thought what I did. When you woke up, it's like legally Brazilian people are banned off the internet. You were like, you know what? It's like that thing, At the end of the day, I don't agree with the way it's done, but it did need to be done. You know what?
I mean, listen, I have been advocating for a long time. Why can't we just have like a regional block on your Twitter account?
That'd be great.
Problem solved. Problem solved. I've made the joke before, but I have seen Van Pater's dick more times than Van Pater, for fuck's sake. And now that they've banned him, they banned the Brazilians, I almost miss it. I'm going to have to start dating Van Pater to see it again. It's the only way out, So, but there was a little bit like, please, thank you.
So, as much as people complain, I do believe that we are going to see very large viewership for the planned clashes between North and South Conference in LCS or in the Americas, whatever they call it, the Americas region, right? I do believe that the peak viewership of these finals, which they've said are going to happen like at the end of the first split, You know, they're going to have like a lock-in style tournament, which is exactly what I theorized they were going to do just based on the timing. And it's going to play into more competition between Brazil and North America. Like, obviously, you get the Latin American teams in each division as well. We're going to have another international event. Also, Esports World Cup is existing now. How that will exist next year is in question because Riot has stored it. I'm not going to say claimed, sort of claimed, implied that MSI will still be run by Riot next year. And that they
will not be Esports World Cup, according to them so far.
But there was some very dodgy loopholes in the phrasing.
It was more that MSI won't be run by in Saudi Arabia anytime. So again, like Monty said, like they put so many like couching, like load-bearing words that weren't quite specific. That it seemed like they were sort of trying to say Monty's wrong, but he might be right, but only in the spirit of the law, not that, and doing one of those. So we'll wait and see on that one. I feel like
we'll wait and see. You know, they didn't say that MSI is definitely happening and is being run by Riot. Like they could just not do MSI and to just run Esports World Cup with the same format.
The joke is they just renamed MSI to not MSI, and then that's run by the Saudi. And then Monty was wrong again. We win. High five, everyone. You know, as usual.
Actually, the mid-year invitational.
Yeah, exactly. MYI, the only worse name than MSI. So in any case, like the point is that Riot is clearly moving to a system where the priority is on these big international events and like huge peak viewership. Previously, their strategy was on domestic leagues with domestic sponsors and consistent average concurrent viewership. But they're clearly like trying to pare down domestic competition and hit higher peaks, which, by the way, for all Riot's faults, I don't think one of them has been that they have failed to sell to major international sponsors at international events. MasterCard, Mercedes, Red Bull. I think they are very good at selling like the big ticket items, you know, obviously the Louis Vuitton collaboration for Worlds. And so I think they're looking at it now and they're saying, well, maybe our strategy has failed in terms of monetizing every individual league domestically. But if we have more international competition, like our big package deals that we're selling can do better. And this is clearly like the strategy they're going with moving forward. Like, I don't think that, you know, we're going to have as many viewed hours on Americas as we had on LCS, you know, and CBLOL combined, to be fair. So like if you say, here are the viewed hours on LCS and CBLOL from this year, I don't think we're going to have that many viewed hours. But I do think that for the big matches that happen between Brazil and North America, the peak viewership will be higher, the hype will be higher. I want to watch it more, frankly, so I like the product better, and we get more international events. So I think Riot is actually moving in a good direction with this, to be clear. Now, we can obviously ask the question, why did anything ever have to be done in a different manner? Like, why did we have to take 10 years to get here? Because people who know esports would have just started with this plan, clearly. Yeah. So it was a dumbass decision, but I don't think it is the wrong one right now.
Yeah, this all sounds fine. Again, I don't think you're going to find anyone who has the leg to stand on saying that, like, fundamentally the decision is sound for, like, where they either should have started or where they should go. Those are both, at this point, the exact same thing. The question I would actually levy is Riot actually capable of like getting it done? Like, is it going to be smooth? Is it going to work? Like,
well, no,
there's a lot of questions.
Savvy Gaming is. Don't worry, Dana. Savvy Gaming is. Like,
because there's like so many weird questions around. Like, they just made these like big sweeping changes to NACL and the introduction of collegiate teams. There's like this weird League of Legends has always had like a multi-week process for playoffs. So like, how are you going to bring these teams in, out, and around? I've done the visa process both directions, both into the US from Brazil and into Brazil from the US. Also not the easiest, like fastest thing that's ever happened. So there's just a lot of weird like areas where I feel like we're going to be hanging. And yeah, like I guess if it's just ESL does it, it'll be fine. But my apprehension is like, I don't think Riot historically has been known for just releasing authority over what they're doing overnight. And I'm curious what this transition will look like, regardless of who ends up actually running it on the other end.
They're going to want Riot people in the room, but I think you know my read on it increasingly, as I said earlier, is I don't think they care about it to the same degree they used to. It's like, if you understand who these people are, it was essentially a startup where they hired a bunch of their weirdo friends to be weirdos in a weirdo setting. There's no better place
And
to
their
be a
weirdo
fucking
brothers to run their weirdo
Oh yeah,
esports.
there's no better place to be a weirdo than fucking esports, because as we see time and time again, you can get away with it forever. The system seems to be very stacked in the weirdos' favor, unfortunately, and that's what they did. And they really valued having control over this little dominion of theirs, which was esports. They loved it at the start. You couldn't go to an esports event, no matter how fucking small or insignificant it was, without some riot cunt in a red t-shirt being there, like sticking their fucking fingers in the gumbo, right? And not just the gumbo, apparently. So, that was just how they operated. They wanted total control over the industry. They retconned history to essentially say, we built the fucking industry. That was totally here when we turned up, but we definitely built it. A glorious emperor fucking designed the light bulb. Don't ask questions. That's what they did. But increasingly, that's just not true. Like you can tell by the level of hostility and weirdness and the number of stories that are popping up. They are absolutely now more interested in the games development. They want to take over the FGC. They're more interested in having these ties to Saudi Arabia and obviously the Chinese government, so they can make more money to sell those games and all of the products there. They're increasingly less interested in esport. They're more interested in media and development of TV shows and what have you. And it's like, it tells its own story, because 10 years ago, you couldn't be involved in League, even tangentially, without Riot trying to fuck you over in some way or bring you to heel. Now, I do genuinely believe they will acquiesce almost near total control of the LCS and LEC products over to their Saudi Arabian partners over at the Savvy Games Group. I see that as an inevitability at this point, because what's on the table is they will underwrite it. They will underwrite this clearly failing product that everyone wants to, pull the ripcord on and get out of. And they will underwrite the money, and also, as we've seen, for good or ill, they're almost as good, if not equally as good, as getting the same big partner brands into their things. And think about the product they've got to overcome. If you're Riot Games and you get in a room with MasterCard, you go, don't look at that report about how the systemic sexism and all of the creepy weirdo shit. And they go, we work in banking, mate. We don't look at our reports, motherfucker. Like, don't look at the things we get up to. And so that's fine. That is that you overcome that hurdle pretty easily.
We let MasterCard. Who knows what the banks do? Like, MBS is out there buying bone saws on credit. Like,
right. But that's what I mean. Meanwhile, if you're Saudi Arabia and you've got to negotiate sponsors, and they go, this bloody, it's a bit problematic, when you're soaring up journalists and the tapes getting leaked that you totally ordered it and shit. And but they're doing fine. They're going, forget about that. We're an independent company. We're completely removed from that because we're through a series of shell companies. And they had overlapping sponsors. They had some overlapping sponsors between the Esports World Cup and the LCS. So honestly, I don't see what the downside would be, other than the fact that it's another huge esports property going into the hands of the Saudi Arabian state. From Riot's perspective, it would still be the thing that it was always meant to be initially, which was to be some sort of weird loss leader to attract people to the game by creating an aspirational element for players.
I don't want to get too far into this because, this is another show, but there's also some very interesting possibilities based on the TikTok lawsuit that's happening right now. Because if you guys have been following it, the U.S. judges seem to not be buying TikTok's argument that they can't be forced to sell because of security concerns and privacy concerns by a Chinese-owned company. Guess who's owned by China? Oh, that'd be Riot Games. So there is a world, guys, where Riot's lawyers are definitely watching this, obviously. Oh, yeah. But, there's a world where Riot in its entirety is sold to Saudi Arabia. There is a world where the esports division of Riot is spun off as a separate company, given an exclusive contract for the next decade to run League esports, and that entity is bought by Savvy Game Group. There's a lot of weird possibilities that could happen here, where it's well, the Riot Esports division is now in its own independent company that is a subsidiary of Savvy Games, and we have a long-term partnership with them as Riot Games, the development company, right? So I think there's many things that could be happening, but the TikTok lawsuit might also just force Riot to be sold at some point in time, depending on how that turns out. So, I mean, everybody's looking at this right now. And by the way, no one will care if Saudi Arabia owns Riot Games, because they already own giant chunks of Uber, Disney, you know.
Well, I mean, you know, already a 10-cent company as well. So, you know, we all know about the golden share. So, you know what I mean? It's like, forget about it. It's all
you really have to, I mean, I think this is another reason why you keep seeing like Riot executives visiting Saudi Arabia, sometimes somewhat clandestinely.
Yeah, they hate it when the LinkedIn crowd fucking leak it, fuck it up for everyone. Yeah, it's like, I mean, imagine that. By the way, it's like, what are people doing on LinkedIn? It's like, it was just in a room with Moloch and Baal, like fucking negotiating for souls. Like, no, don't post that shit, man. Like, fucking the other people in that room, especially, don't want you posting that shit. So what the fuck
actually
are you
so
doing?
good.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like,
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.